Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. Joining us is Lisa Doran from Innovia Consulting, and Lisa's going to be presenting on the underutilized functionality of analysis reports. Everyone can budget, forecast, and analyze data with Business Central. Before I pass it over to Lisa to cover on this topic, I would like to remind you that we are recording this session and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box. We will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. So now I'm going to pass it on over to Lisa to kick off our presentation.
Great, thanks Angie. Good morning everyone. Today we're going to be going over the information about the analysis and reporting features in Business Central. So we'll get started here with the presentation. So some of the features in the analysis and reporting functionality within Business Central is that it gives non-finance users the ability to easily budget, forecast, and analyze some of the data. The analysis reports can be used to create customized reports based on posted transaction data, such as sales, purchases, transfers, and inventory adjustments that are found within the ledger entries. Personalized reports can be created to focus on the turnover in both amounts or quantities sold, gross profit amount and percentage, comparisons to previous months or years, variances, etc. You even have the opportunity to drill into the data in the event that you need more details on the actual transactions that are comprising the analysis report values. Additionally, incorporating dimensions into the analysis can provide even greater insight into the business. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump right in. We're going to walk through a demonstration of creating analysis reports in a Business Central environment. So analysis reports include lines and columns, and it's very similar in the structure to the account schedules. The lines are going to contain the objects that you want to analyze, such as customers or vendors, while the columns contain the analysis parameters that you define for how you want to view the objects, such as profit calculations, sales amount comparisons, etc. To create an analysis report, you have to follow some steps to create. There's pretty simple steps, but we have to follow them in order. We have to create a line template. We have to create a column template, and then we bring those two things together in an analysis report with a name and description and the combination of the line and column templates for the analysis that you're going to be completing. So today what we're going to do is we're going to just walk through creating a sales analysis report that will analyze some sales turnover and profit. So first we're going to search for sales analysis line templates. And again, the lines are what we want to analyze. So in this case, we're going to create a line template for all of our customers. In this particular environment, we don't have a terrible number of customers, so it's pretty simple to create. So I'm just going to give it a name and a description. And then when I navigate into the line section, this is where we get to build the rows of data that will comprise this information. So again, in our demo environment, we just have a very few customers. Obviously, if you have a lot of customers, you can follow the same functionality here, bring things in. If you go onto actions, functions, then you have some opportunities to let the system pull in information for you. Again, it's very similar to the process that you would follow with account schedules. So in this case, we're going to just choose to insert customers. And when we choose this, what we'll be able to do is select, in this case, we just have 6 customers. We'll select them all here and we'll click OK. And that will bring them all into our analysis here. What we could do if we wanted to, I could add a total. So we have the ability to build totals into the sales analysis lines. So we would have some formulas. But what we would be able to do that, first in this case, in our demo environment, we can see the row reference number that came in is the customer number, and it doesn't exactly follow a similar structure. So what we would be able to do is run a function to renumber all of the lines. So I could choose my function to renumber lines, and I can give it my first row number, and I'm going to just start at 10 in this case. And what that does, oops, we missed our first one here. We'll manually change that. What that does is it gives us a chance to resequence so we could build an easier formula rather than having to pick, in this case, we had numeric and alphanumeric. By renumbering our rows, we're able to build an easier formula. So what we would be able to do is if we wanted to add a line for our formula, I can give the total, give it a number, and in this case, my type, I'm going to choose that it's a formula, and I'm going to tell it what is my range of rows that I want to include in my formula. And so in this case, I'm going to start with row 09 and go through 14. Obviously, if you are expanding this in the future, you might want to go 00 through 100, give yourself room for future expansion. Just something in this case, it's very simple. We'll just be able to follow the numbers that we have in place right now. So what that will do is when we're doing our analysis, it will give us the details for our customers, and then it will also give us a total row. Some of the other things that we're able to do in our sales analysis lines is determine how we want to format some of the data. So what we can do is if we're printing our report, we could choose whether or not we want to show the column or the row of data. Again, we could, it's a hard yes or no, or we can do it conditionally. So if any column isn't 0, it would appear. So in the event that potentially you have a customer that doesn't have any sales in the period that you're analyzing, you wouldn't have to have that customer show up on the report that way. Additionally, you have the opportunity to make things bold, italic, underline. So for example, in this case, I'll put an underline under this last customer because I want to show an underline before I get my total. And then I want to make my total a bold figure. Okay, so again, very similar structure to building account schedules. So if you're familiar with building account schedules, the concept is similar here in building the lines, and then we're also going to build columns. So now that we have built our lines that show the customers that we're going to analyze, we'll close this. And we'll close this, and we're going to now navigate to sales analysis column templates. And again, as we mentioned, the columns give us those parameters for how we want to view the objects. So whether it's profit or sales amounts, etc. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a simple column. We're just going to call it sales. And what we're going to be doing is comparing our actuals versus our last year actuals. So then we're going to go ahead and click columns. And then we'll start building the details of the columns that we want included. So in this case, I'm just going to be manually entering some information here. And so I'm going to give my column numbers. I'm going to be looking at sales amounts as well as sales quantities. So I'm going to just give my column numbers sequential starting with an S or sequential starting with a Q for sales versus quantity, so that we can use those when we're building our formulas and it'll make a little bit more sense. So our first line, since we're looking at actuals for the period, and then we're going to be able to do some analysis to prior periods. What I want to include is anything that is shipped, not invoiced, because that is technically part of our sales if we want to pick up that information. So this checkbox here, this invoiced, is going to be what will help pull the information into the shipped, not invoiced. So this will take care of all of our entries that are sales entries that have not yet been invoiced. And how we know what we're going to pick up is going to be defined in this analysis type code. Now we can see when I drill down here, I don't have anything defined. So what we would do, and what you would be able to do if you go into your system and you don't have this information set up, we're going to choose select from full list. And if we go into setup here, we have an option to reset to the default analysis types. And when we run that function, we can see we get a lot of options here, and these are all predefined out-of-the-box options for the different analysis that we could do. So it's whether we're looking at cost of goods sold or inventory quantities, adjustments. In this case, sales amounts and sales quantities is what we'll be looking at when we're building our analysis. But you can see we have a lot of different options here for the different item ledger entry type of information that we're looking for that will be the basis of our analysis. So I'm just going to close this back, and in this case I'm going to select my sales amount. So here on this particular column, it will show us our shipped not invoiced. It'll take the sales amount from those ledger entries for any ledger entries that are not marked as invoiced. And we'll continue on and build a couple more columns. So in this case, we're looking at our invoiced sales. And again, we'll just choose the same analysis type. And then we also want to look at quantity. And for this one, we'll choose sales quantity. And then that's showing us when we pick our analysis type code, it's filling in the value type code for us, so we know we're looking at amounts versus quantities. And in this case, thinking of how the data is built within the item ledger entries, obviously a sale is a depletion of inventory, and so that would be a negative quantity, but when we're doing an analysis, we don't necessarily want to see those as negatives, so I have the opportunity to show opposite sign, so I can show those all as positive values coming through. And so then if there are some sales returns, for example, they would be reduced from that value, but again, it's still showing sort of the opposite sign, so you're not showing a positive sale value with a negative quantity, for example. So we'll just add a few more here. So our sales total, in this case, it's going to be a formula, and I'm going to add my first two columns together because I want to include both invoiced and shipped not invoiced. So I'm adding those two values together. Then we'll add some information for last year. And that will be invoiced. And here we're going to go to our comparison date formula, and we're going to choose -1Y for a year ago. And again, the same analysis type code. So we're going to do a sales amount on this row. And then we're going to do our quantity for last year. And again, we'll do our comparison date formula. We'll show our opposite sign, and we'll choose our sales quantity. And finally, we're going to calculate a variance percentage between the 2 years. So this will be another formula. And what we'll do is we're going to take this year compared to last year. And so doing this formula basically will give us a better, more accurate view of the percentages. So it brings it more to a whole number rather than decimal quantities. So that's why we're building this formula this way to make it a little bit more user-friendly when it's being displayed. Okay. So this is one set of sales criteria. So we've built our columns here. I'm going to close this, and I want to build one more just so that we can see a couple different ways to look at the data for our customers in this example. So we've built our line template for all of our customers, and we're going to build a couple different column templates to look at the data. So in this case, I'm just going to do one for profit. And this will be simpler, more straightforward columns. We're just going to look at our sales, our cost of sales, and calculate our margin and our margin percentage. So this will be simple. We've got our sales. So we're looking at everything invoiced in this case. We'll choose our sales amount. Then we're going to want to look at our cost of goods sold. And again, cost is negative, so we want to show this so we're making it a little bit more user-friendly and better formatted for understanding. So we're going to show opposite sign on that one. And then we're going to choose cost of goods sold in our analysis type. So now we see we've got sales amount and cost amount. Then we're going to create a gross margin. And this will be a formula, and it would be A1. And in this case, it's A1 plus A2 because we've done the opposite sign here. So we're going to get those added together, and then we're going to do one final formula for the percentage. So in this case, we're going to take our margin, divide it by sales, and again, times 100 so that we can get it in a more user-friendly format. So now what we've done is very quickly built a couple different columns of ways to analyze some of the information related to our customers. So I'll go ahead and close this. And again, just to reiterate, what we're doing here is we're being able to analyze data based on the item ledger entries. And so item ledger entries, we have sales, we have purchases, we have inventory transactions, everything is flowing through there. And by building the analysis reports based on the item ledger entries, it gives us a chance to really get down into the posted transactions and give us a chance to do some analysis accordingly. All right, so now we've got our line templates and we've got our column templates. So lastly, I am going to navigate to the sales analysis reports, and we're going to take a look at how these will come together. Okay, so we have to give our analysis, we have to give it a name and description and then tie the templates together. So first we're just going to do all sales, and this is just all customer sales. So our lines, obviously at this point, we just have one line template picking up all of our customers. And then we have our sales, actual versus last, that we'll choose for this one. And then we're going to choose all profit. And again, we have just one line template, and then we'll select our profit column template. So now that we have these two sales analysis reports in place, now we can take a look at what they look like when we want to include the data. So we're going to go ahead and go into Edit Analysis Report. And what we've got here is the preparation of the matrix view into this data. So it's pulling in obviously the line and the column template that we've given it. And what we have a chance here is to determine how we want to look at it. Do we want to look at it by day, week, month, etc.? So I'll go ahead and just leave it at a year. At this point, with demo data, we have a limited amount of information that's available to us. So if we leave it at a year, I can hopefully get more information into my analysis report to look at it. And so I'm going to go ahead and choose Show Matrix. And so since we're on our profit, let me close that for a second. So here we're looking at our profit sales analysis. So when I come in and I show my matrix, so now what I'm seeing is we've got our rows of all of our customers that we selected, and we have our columns of the information based on what we put in our column templates. So now what we're able to do is see by customer, what do we have for total sales, cost of sales, we've calculated our margin and our percentages. And what we have is drillable information here. So I can drill into the details that are provided here. And let me take this off for a second and we'll make this a little bit bigger. And so what this is doing is it's bringing us into, in this case, the value entries for all of the invoicing for this particular customer for the period in question. And if I put my filter pane back, we can see what it's doing. So it's looking for all of the sale entries for our year, because we selected to do our analysis for a year. In this case, our row is for customer 10,000, and it's telling us that the source type is a customer. So this is pulling all of this information together, and again, giving you just a little bit of background into why we are doing what we're doing, right? So we have sales here is a positive value, and our cost amount is a negative. So that's why we selected to show it as an opposite sign. So we're not seeing those columns laid out maybe in a confusing manner if you're sharing this report with folks who might not be privy to the way that the finance operations run with positives and negatives through the system, etc. And again, we have negative quantities. So again, that's why we are setting our opposite sign depending on how we want to display that information. But the nice thing here is we do have the ability to drill into all of this information as we're doing this analysis. So once we have this in place, this is something that we can take a look at here on the screen, which gives us the ability to drill into it. Additionally, while we're here in our edit analysis view screen, we have a few options. We could print a report. So we could choose our report. Again, it's choosing the information based on the analysis report that we selected and we drilled into. We could change our date filters here if we wanted to. We can preview the report. We could send it to Excel. We could do all the things that we normally would do, send it to PDF, etc. But here's a printed view of our analysis. Obviously, printed, you lose the ability to drill into it, but it is a nice way to pull together the information if you wanted to share it across the business to different folks who might not have access to Nav or Business Central to be able to get to that information. And one thing to keep in mind, so here in our profit analysis report, if I come back, we just have a few different columns, right? So we had sales, we have cost of sales, we had margin and a margin percent. So a smaller number of columns, but in our sales, we had a lot more columns, right? So we had shipped not invoiced, sales amount, etc. So if we go ahead and just look at this matrix here for a moment, we have a lot more columns here within this analysis view. So in this particular case, if you were to print the report, it's not going to pick up all of the columns because unfortunately the report at this stage isn't smart enough, I guess, to switch between portrait and landscape depending on the number of columns. So in this case, you might be better served to take your information here and send it out to Excel. So you might be used to being able to pull information out into Excel. So I could just choose open in Excel. And this is coming up on my other screen here. Let me move it over. So then here we have all the details that were in our analysis view. And then we've just sent it out to Excel. So then you'd be able to share this data, maybe not in a printed format, but you could save it as this file, or you could print it from Excel if you wanted to generate a report. So that's just something to be aware of depending on the number of columns that you build into your analysis. You may not be able to use a printed report necessarily for it. If you have too many columns that don't fit on a portrait report format, you may need to send it out to Excel. Okay. So a couple other things to keep in mind with analysis views. If you want to analyze customer groups or item groups or salespeople, you would need to set up a corresponding dimension in an analysis view card. So pulling in the finance folks, we would need to make sure that we have dimensions that would correspond to those groups. And then depending on the analysis that you set up and what you're trying to get at with those dimensions, you would actually have to also define those groups in the sales and receivables setup or inventory setup screens. So let me just show you that real quick. So in the sales and receivables setup on the dimensions tab, this may be something that has just sort of been left and ignored on your setup screen. But these dimensions, the customer group dimension or salesperson dimension, depending on the analysis view that you set up, you would set these dimensions here, and then you have them available to be able to build into your analysis views. Similarly, you have an item group dimension that's in your inventory setup. So you do have the ability to pull dimension data as well, provided you set up the analysis view and do the setup. Additionally, so this, what we've looked at so far, has been all based on actual information, actual sales. In this case, again, knowing that there are purchase analysis reports and inventory analysis reports that are also available following similar structure setup where you have lines and columns. You'll be able to build analysis reports that might be focused more towards vendor performance or inventory turnover, for example. But you also have the ability to build budget entries. So if, for example, you have some sales budgets per customer that you might be looking at and want to do a comparison of what you anticipate or have forecasted for your customer sales versus what they're actually doing, you can build sales or purchase budgets to help support that information to do future analysis. So let's just navigate there quickly. And we'll choose sales budgets. And again, this is similar in functionality to the GL budgets that are available, but in this case, obviously with sales budgets, what we're doing is building a different kind of budget that obviously is independent from the financial budgets that would be more geared to what we're doing on a sales analysis side. So in this particular case, we have a template set up here for a customer budget. again, similar to GL budgets, you can have multiple budgets in place. So you can have customer budgets, salesperson budgets, different budgets that you want to use when you're doing the analysis, and then you can sort of pick and choose what you're doing when you're doing your analysis. In this case, let's go ahead and just go into this budget very quickly. And so what we've got here is we're showing our columns as periods, and we're showing values. If we had values in here for the columns, they would be cost amount. We have our lines here as a customer. But the nice thing that we have here, so you could certainly sit down and start entering information into these columns, but obviously that's a pretty manual process and could be time consuming, obviously, if you had more than 6 customers. So what we'll go ahead and do is under actions, we have the ability to export to Excel, and then we could then import that data back in from Excel to create the budget entries. So in this case, I'll just go ahead and create a new Excel template. And what that's doing is it's just pulling out the information as I had it. So it's showing me my lines, columns, and telling me that this is cost amount information. So I could then start filling this information in if I anticipate what the cost of goods sold would be for these customers. And then I could fill all this information in and pull it back in. So what I have done ahead of time is I've already populated a couple files, one for the sales side and one for the cost side. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that information in. So when I'm choosing my import from Excel, it's going to assume the budget that I'm on. My option here is to either add or replace entries. So in this case, I'm going to add entries if I had started a budget and I had problems with it and it wasn't really showing what I had wanted and I needed to redo it. I could choose to replace entries, and it's basically going to delete all the budget entries that exist and pull new ones back in. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and add entries. And in this case, I'll be importing my cost of goods sold. So I'm going to choose OK, and then I'm going to choose my file to pull in. So I've got a cost of goods sold budget, and it's going to just want me to confirm. And then it tells me that it's got 72 entries that have pulled in. And so now what we can see is in a very simple budget I've built, I have basically the same numbers that are repeating each month. Obviously these could change, but what I've got here is it's pulled in all of the cost of goods sold and totaled it up for my period. My date filter here is for the year 2019. So it's pulling in all of the information and giving me those totals. So then I could do one more import, and I could in this time choose sales amount, and I'll choose my file that has my sales budget, confirm, and now what we've got is I've got sales budgets, I've got cost budgets, and then now with this budget in place, I could then build an analysis view that might show me my sales actual versus my sales budget with any variance, my cost actual, cost budget with any variance, just so I can see how I'm doing actual to forecast, in this case for the customer forecast sales that I have in place. So again, it's a bit of a manual process, but it does give you the chance to send templates out to Excel and build information. And of course, depending on what you do, obviously all the data in Business Central is pretty easy to pull out. So maybe you have an analysis view set up that's showing me all of my sales and cost of sales for a customer for a prior year, for example, and I could then take that out and within Excel, I could manipulate that, and maybe I want to assume a 10% increase. So using Excel formulas, I could build my template and basically using last year's information from an analysis view that I've pulled out, I can manipulate the information, populate my budget template, pull it back in, and within a matter of minutes, I've basically forecasted my customers based on prior information and making some, some assumptions on what we hope we'd have growth wise, for example, over a period. And once budgets are in, again, same concept that you would have with GL budgets. If I wanted to change this, if I thought, oh, for some reason, January's not going to really work out as well, I can change these figures within here, and it's going to start keeping track of all that information. So if I could drill in here, it's going to show me that I have imported, I've imported sales, I've imported cost, and then I've manually done an adjustment to the cost. And it is recognizing that as a change in cost because my value display is set at cost amount. So if I wanted to change this and I wanted to also adjust the sales value for this customer for that period, I could do the same thing here and manually do an update. And if I drill back in, I'll see similar information here where I have my sales amount that was imported, and then I have my adjustment to that sales amount from a manual entry. So not terribly sophisticated in terms of doing the calculations for you, but it is nice to be able to have this information to then incorporate it into your analysis views. Okay. So this is a pretty simple concept for the analysis reports. There is pretty good online documentation regarding this at the link you see here. So it is something that is helpful. And quite honestly, analysis reports, in the midst of an implementation, we're trying to make sure that the day-to-day business is up and running. Any of those key reports, financials, receivables, payables, sales invoicing, things of that nature, those are our focus when we're trying to get customers live on a new implementation. And analysis reports really sort of fall by the wayside, and we don't ever have a chance to sort of circle back and go over some of these functionality items that really could be helpful, giving users the ability to get at some of their data in a more usable fashion. Everything is starting to gather in history. Analysis reports really gives you a chance to use some of the functions in the system and get some of that information out without having to recreate a report, whether you're doing jet reports or you're building reports within Business Central or you're using another report writing software. This really does give you a chance to use some of the information within the system, particularly for those users who might not be the strong financial users. So you've got warehouse or manufacturing folks who really want to see some of the information about inventory turns or things of that nature. Analysis reports really gives you the opportunity to use that data and build some of that analysis within the system with real-time data. Okay, so that is it for me for my presentation. Angie, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, one question did come through.
Okay.
Does the setup have a scheduler option to automatically run the reports periodically once set up?
I think that in theory, potentially. I guess that's a great question, and I have not tried to schedule it, but the analysis reports it's running a report, right? So we do have the opportunity to run it as a report. So potentially, the job queue could be configured with the options for that report to print it and display it on certain on a certain schedule, but I would have to, honestly, I'd have to look into that and see if the report options are actually configurable enough to let you have that sort of on a predetermined schedule, whether it's weekly or et cetera. So I would actually have to look into that and get back with you for sure to see what the options would be to try to schedule that information. That's a great question though.
Okay, sounds good. If anybody has any further questions for Lisa, please go ahead and type them into the questions box. Or if you'd like, you can contact her or your account manager at Innovia Consulting with any additional questions, and we can discuss them further with you. All right, well, thank you, Lisa, for presenting today, and to everyone on today's webinar, or if you are watching on demand, we thank you for joining us. And for those of you that will be attending our customer conference, Lisa will be there, so come meet Lisa and the rest of the Innovia team. And we do have a few more webinars coming soon. This Thursday, we have John Grant and Jenny Hollingsworth from Innovia Consulting presenting on an expert guide to production BOMs, Business Central for Manufacturing 101. They're going to be doing a continuing series on manufacturing. So check out our website and register for their webinar series on manufacturing. And then next Tuesday, we have Equisys presenting on document and expense management doesn't have to be a hassle. And like I said, check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that is innovia.com/events. And also, Innovia has a podcast going on. If you have not heard of it already, it's called the Innovia Conversation. And we want to encourage you to listen to our selection that Steve and Jeff have provided to us over the last year. They do about 2 episodes a month, and you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out our podcast selection and subscribe so you will be notified when those new episodes air. And our annual customer conference is coming up on May 20th and 21st here in South Bend, Indiana. Contact your rep or visit our conference page where we have all the details for our conference. That website is innovia.com/conferences. This is a free event for our customers to attend, and we would love to have you. So register now so you don't miss out on the great event. All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Lisa, for presenting, and we look forward to seeing you on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.